Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Innovate My School's first ever lockdown webinar. My name is Ben, and I founded Rocket Fund, which is a crowdfunding platform for schools, which has recently been on pause during this lockdown. And I've been working with Innovate My School, which is this fantastic community of innovative teachers and school leaders that Michael Forshaw has built over the last few years, and he's on the call as well. And today we brought on basically an expert to discuss the challenges that we're currently going through, schools are currently going through during the coronavirus lockdown, and to try and help you guys gear up for September and the coming next school year. So I will now, can everyone hear me before I keep going? Neelam, can you hear me okay? If you can take yourself off mute, Neelam, that'd be awesome.
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Right, so thanks everyone, and yeah, please leave messages in the chat. That's brilliant. Awesome. So first of all, let's introduce Dr. Neelam Parmar. She's the Director of Education Technology, Digital Learning and Innovation at Ashford School. She's also the Education Technology Advisor at the United Learning Trust. She's a member of the DfE's EdTech Advisory Group, and she's the author of Digital Literacy in the Primary series and the Digital Parenting book. Hello, Neelam.
Hi, Ben. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very well. Very excited to see so many people joining this workshop today.
Yeah.
So we call this a workshop because we want to make it interactive. And the first thing we're going to do is show you who's attending this workshop. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you can see this. This is a map of everyone who's registered. As you can see, this is with, Innovate My School is based in the UK, but it's a global community. And got people from all over the world here today, which is really exciting. And the breakdown of who registered, this obviously majority school staff, which is great to see. A few parents, a few others, which we think actually were mostly school staff, looking at the people who registered, and a few education suppliers. So it's nice to see a cross section. And we've got both secondary, primary, and colleges represented today. So it's a nice spread. But that's who registered. Now what we wanted to do is a quick poll to see who's actually turned up. So if you could answer this question now, which is on your screen, just so we can see who's on board. Right, results are coming in. Almost there, 80% voted. Right, we'll give it a few more seconds. I guess there's 20 people having a cup of tea. Right, so can you see the results of the poll?
Yes.
So here we go. So we got teachers, head teachers, senior leaders, digital leaders, really, really nice spread of members of staff from across the school. And Neelam, can you tell us why you think that's important?
So hello everyone, really great to be here today, and I'm very impressed by the numbers. So thank you for coming on board. I'm really sorry to see my photo so many times, either via Twitter or LinkedIn. I was starting to get fed up of my own face actually, so thanks for being here. I'm really, again, very impressed with the fact that we've got people from everywhere. From Dubai, from Missouri, from England, that's from what I've seen so far. So it's going to be quite exciting, I think. We're going to be bringing in a lot of experiences. But just answering your question as to why I think it's important to have a list of these different sort of roles is because, as we know, the whole edtech strategy, digital strategy is quite pervasive by nature. It's not just having the technology in the school, running a project with it, and hey ho, we're done. We've implemented tech in our environment. We know now through experience and very much living in this environment as we are within COVID that technology is affecting everyone's lives, lives for parents and students, but more so for the teachers, the head teachers who are running the schools, for IT directors to make this work. I mean, never has there been a busier time for the IT guys. They've been busy, yes, but now they're working around the clock. IT coordinators, parents, government, trying to make big policy decisions. So, we're very aware that this is relevant in everyone's lives, in everyone's capacities. And so having this poll results here shows that it's a topic that's interesting to all.
Fantastic. Right, so next we're going to do I'm going to have a short presentation from Neelam about how to build a digital strategy for your school. But before we dive into that, there's a bit of an elephant in the room that we want to address, or key challenge that keeps coming up and is totally understandable. It's been coming up for years. So Neelam, before we dive into your presentation, can you answer how can schools, or how can we address one of the biggest challenges, which is either a poor internet connection or a lack of student access to devices at home?
So we know that there is this big problem, what you call the white elephant in the room, or some people call the digital divide or digital poverty. And it is affecting a majority of a significant amount of schools in the country, particularly in the UK. We're in a situation where a great number of schools have either established technology in the environment or have technology to run with. But I think the government is doing the best it can do at this moment in time in terms of offering technology to local authorities and schools. We know, and I think you know too, it's not enough. It's just not enough. So I suppose if you're in a situation where you're looking to bring in tech into your school, maybe some of the things you can do, and thinking it, from a really big perspective here, try to get in touch with perhaps make partnerships, collaborations with suppliers and providers, and see if they can bring in perhaps devices for your school. I do have other things I want to talk about, but that's in my presentation. But from this whole digital divide point of view, it's unfortunate we're here. However, we do have some schools that are ready to go, and we should be working with those students those schools that are ready to move forward, because they're in a very exciting phase, if not progressive stage. But I will offer some more tips and techniques in my presentation, if that's okay. It's really good you've brought this to the forefront, because I think we need to be aware that we're not able to fix these problems on the spot. However, we can call on help, and we may have creative ideas and get in touch with solution providers, or building partnership with external suppliers from Innovate My School or edtech Impact, who can possibly help with the refurbished solutions, devices, and any other sort of out-of-box ideas we can get.
Cool. Okay, great. So we summarized this earlier, but just to sort of recap, there's 3 or 4 ways we came up with. There's the government's device scheme, which has obviously been launched in the UK. Yeah. You mentioned partnering with solution providers who may be able to provide devices, and also looking at refurbished computers to be able to access more affordable kits. And of course, you're welcome to crowdfund for it as well, which is what we set up Rocket Fund for in the first place. Right, so moving on, now let's dive into your presentation. So we asked you if you could talk to us about how to build a digital strategy for your school. And are you going to give us a sort of 10-minute snapshot of how you normally approach that, right?
Okay, here we go. Let me share my screen. Right. I'm just going to start. Here we go. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right. I might minimize this on the left-hand side so you have full access to my screen, okay? I'm not going to be able to see anybody, so feel free to just stop me if you have any questions. Okay?
Okay, yeah.
So this is probably my favorite topic, getting your school digital ready. And I start with this slide because the world is temporarily closed. And it applies to not just a specific place, it actually went pandemic to the point that we got a crisis. And so with all of that, we had everything closed, but also schools. And we know that through this pandemic crisis, there's so much, we've had different levels of engagement with students and parents, and we've all had to stay at home. Some schools, luckily, we were able to jump on board and just start teaching within 48 hours. Others had to think of more creative ways. But with this pandemic crisis, like I was saying, we had different learning models. And you asked me this question earlier, Ben, what do we do when we have no tech or low tech? And yes, we've quite rightly said, let's try to look at collaborations. One of the things I'd worry about here, which I think is probably very relevant, is whatever we do, we need to have it as a sustainable model. So even if you go to get devices now for schools that don't have it, for instance, 3 years from now, you're going to have to look to get devices again. If they happen to be refurbished devices, then you've got to think 2 years from now, if you can take it that long, we need to renew this model. So whatever we do, it needs to be quite sustainable. Hence why I would perhaps encourage schools who are not set up in this manner to think about maybe partnering with solution providers. And you know, and I speak from experience, because in one of our schools that I was working with, supporting, I got them to partner up with a solution provider known as ViewSonic, and they helped us set up screens in our classroom, some slightly larger, bigger ones that we wanted to sort of do to trial. And since then, we've built a really good relationship with the supplier, and they're always willing to help us when, if and when they can. So I know it's not necessarily this traditional standard method to move forward with, but if at this time when you've got to think out of the box and you've got to be creative and you want to look at something more sustainable, then it's definitely something to consider. So this is some of the things I learned from a conference that I went to quite recently. Schools that have no text, for instance, and we know, you know, some schools have reacted such that they provided textbooks, so they give them worksheets, students, they give them learning packs and send them home. We had the BBC radio, Learn Radio, which is running now throughout this process, where you can learn stuff. And then teachers were sending materials via emails, for instance. And when I say no tech, I mean via TV when they were watching BBC. There was a bit of phone calling, but probably not as much as we would have liked. But mainly it was phone calls from a pastoral point of view. Are you well? Are you safe? And are you mentally sane? And I think all of us could have done with a phone call at that time. Then you have schools that were more low tech, where, you know, there have been some schools, not so much here in the UK because we have GDPR issues, but globally within Philippines and Indonesia, and some more countries that had probably had low risk to deal with, where they were sending homework via WhatsApp. I mean, this is huge in the Indian market, actually. A lot of parents communicate with their teachers in WhatsApp. So if you don't have the technology at home, you have a phone. And if you have a phone, I'm going to send you worksheets and materials for your students. Now, that's not something we would advocate here in the UK, because like I said, we have data privacy issues, but that's something people do abroad. So with low tech, you have phone access. Some schools here would send a student top up, so that they could top up their phone bills and then pick up whatever the teachers were sending them. There would be email communication. So this is an interesting area. I was speaking to a few friends of mine who, you know, who are relatively decent in the sense that, you know, they've got a laptop or more than one device at home, but ones where the parents are both working. And they just felt like they were being penalized because they could have done so much more with their children, but because they went to, for instance, a maintained school in the middle of Kent, they were only receiving worksheets, as some other schools were doing. And so they felt that they could do so much more for their children because they had the opportunities, the gadgets at home to start this whole teaching and learning process. But unfortunately, the school was not up to mark in that area. So they were receiving homework and worksheets through email and then working with their children. This is actually very interesting and probably challenging in these times because parents have had to learn to coexist with their children. And it's not to say that we haven't, but in a world where we are now having to work and teach at the same time, harder for those parents who've got really young ones. So some of the low-tech options, again, was text-to-speech data, upload of worksheets, and then just working with shared devices. And then we had slightly more advanced models where you had asynchronous, synchronous, and blended learning models. And within an asynchronous learning tech environment, you had schools that had virtual learning systems set up, such as Firefly or Moodle or, you know, Canvas, whatever it may be. Who a teacher was then able to send assignments and tasks. Students were able to receive their tasks, fill in their, complete their work, send it back to the teachers, and receive some sort of verbal feedback. Maybe if they were lucky, they would get audio feedback, but generally tend to be verbal and annotated feedback. And that was pretty much it. No live-to-live sessions, and very little interaction with the teachers. Again, we would think this is sufficient. And in fact, the Oak National Academy does a very similar thing and is now promised to deliver another 10 million videos in this manner. And to be fair, their videos are fantastic, I think, very professional, very good teaching, very good assessment that goes with it. However, then this is very reliant on the fact that the student is a conscientious, independent learner and therefore will learn at their pace. Now, again, speaking to friends and families and other parents in this group, some students were just not ready to learn in this manner, and even to get them to study on their own in their bedroom was a very difficult and challenging task. And speaking as a parent, I know how hard that is. If, for instance, your child is not motivated by learning. So asynchronous works, but within a certain context. And then you had other models such as synchronous learning tech, where you would be delivering live lessons using tools that could offer that sort of video conferencing facility, such as Zoom, as you see here, or other ones. Now you can teach a whole class. You could then have pastoral forms. You can have pastoral houses. You can keep in touch with the students. You can put on the video. You can turn it off. You can have audio. You can then differentiate your work. So you go into sets. And you can provide that continuity of learning in such a context that if a student, for instance, was not completing tasks or was not engaging, and you can see that through different tools, which we'll talk about in a minute, then you can actually you can send chats to the student, because it's all under a very governance sort of ecosystem, and you can post some comments and you can kind of bring them back into the learning environment, if not get in touch with them directly. So then there was this whole synchronous learning technology, which many schools have advocated is probably the better way moving forward. I would say that there is a blended approach between both. And that's not what I mean by blended learning models. I'll come to that in a minute. I would say there is definitely use for asynchronous and asynchronous learning technology. And that seems to be the method moving forward, dependent on the type of school, primary or secondary, age of student, and again, the context of the type of students you have. So moving forward, we now have to look at blended learning models. So when students go back into school, and then teachers catering for students in the classroom, out of the country itself. And what would that look like? And I'm not going to talk about that here now. I want to talk about it at the end of the presentation or at the end of the webinar. So what I was to demonstrate here is a different type of learning models that we've come across, some slightly more advanced than others. And this has brought about the digital divide. And we could go on and on about this. And unfortunately, it is true, but like I've mentioned, yes, something good comes out of every crisis. It's woken us up. It's now time to act. And some schools that have jumped on the bandwagon and have got it up and ready as much as they can, as much as they've reacted to the situation, are in a position to improve and refine their processes as they move forward. Some others who are not here yet and who are just starting their journey, you've got the ammunition to now go back to your schools or to your local authorities or to government and say, I got to get started because we just don't know what's going to come next. And for those that have launched successfully and are embedded in this, it's now time to think about, okay, what's going to happen in September and moving forward? How do we continue to keep our students engaged and motivated? So I would say capitalize on the opportunity. We have been talking about implementing tech for as long as we know. We have seen more and more benefits in the last few years. And if anyone has followed me on LinkedIn or any of the articles that I've mentioned, as an edtech advocate, we've always talked about it's always been described as a nice thing to have, but it's no longer a nice thing to have. You've seen it's been kind of the savior in these last few months. It's been the enabler to continue learning, to carry on the sort of distance program that we have with our students. So capitalize on it. Let's not waste what we've done so far. Some of us have had to react to it and reacted well. So we've had to bring the tools on board quickly, learn how to use the different workflows to get teaching and learning continued. Some others have had to half-heartedly come to school, set assignments, send it through, waiting for students to offer feedback. But I think that if anything, the message here now is it's here to, we're in a new norm. I don't particularly like that phrase because I don't think we know what it is, but we are in a new way of working. and we have to adapt to it and be flexible with it. And those people that are going to resist are going to find it extremely hard. I don't think now there is so much an option about whether you're going to deliver learning in this manner or not. If you can, you should. If you cannot, we will find a way for you to do it. If you're already doing it, okay, what's next? How can you help other schools come on board? So we know that tech has been the enabler. So capitalize on the opportunity, look to put it such that it becomes a priority in your school development plan. The reason we look at putting in a digital strategy an edtech strategy is because we don't want it to be reactive. We don't want it to be an isolated project. We don't want somebody sitting within the staff members, within the group saying, okay, this is your lead, now run with it. We want it to be all pervasive. We want it to sort of be it needs to filter into the entire school culture. Everything from the head to the senior leadership team, to the teachers, to the students, to the parents, to the governors, to the administration team, to operation. It needs to shift school culture. But most importantly, if you bring in an edtech strategy, you're not so much doing it as slowly now. We probably we can't be afforded that time and opportunity, but we're trying to open teacher mindset. What's on our side is the fact that we have gone into this with open eyes. We're here in COVID. We know the technology is working. So teachers' mindsets are already changing, which actually is a benefit for us. And within all of this, of course, we want to, it is about education. It is about preparing our students. So we're encouraging and we're offering them the digital literacy skills that they need. We've talked about it over and over and over again. And if anything I can say now is that the schools that I'm supporting, the students have some exemplary digital skills that we never had before, to the point that some of them have actually owned their own learning journey. And that really is the ultimate aim to anything. We want you to own your learning journey. We want you to progress with your interest. We want you to be motivated by yourself. And by having to work in this manner where I'm at home teaching my students and hoping that they pick up on my interest and then run with it, and then produce their tasks, which, by the way, are not graded or assessed, but more product outcome. That for me is amazing, and that's what I'm seeing the students doing. So in terms of what a digital strategy is, and some of you may have seen this, it's a program. It's a program that includes digital leadership, ecosystems, teaching and learning, and a training program. As we started, it includes all the stakeholders in the school environment, from vision to implementation to sustainability and progression.
Neelam, I've got to pause you there, Neelam. I'm the jargon police. And the alarm just went off. And so digital ecosystems, what exactly do you mean by that?
Okay, so digital ecosystems is really the type of technologies that you're going to use that's going to deliver your educational workflows. And educational workflows are things like setting a task, student returning their task, reviewing the task and offering feedback in methods of audio, verbal, and now in today's context, chatting and posting, even giving a few emojis to some extent. So we're
talking about devices and hardware and software and...
No, not so much. Ecosystem is really the kind of, if I can give an example again from our point of view, we're an Office 365 school. So it's that Office 365 environment, and then using Teams in that model where I'm able to teach as a teacher within the Teams itself, live, verbal, audio, uploading of presentations, and then setting assignments and tasks and doing feedback. So it's that, if you want to put it crudely, it's that software application that affords me the educational workflows that I need in my school.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
So really, we're doing teaching and learning digital transformation. We want to do digital transformation to encourage it's often said that we're doing digital transformation within a teaching and learning context, and it's always been looked at like that, mainly to improve students' digital literacies, or create a program for teaching and learning for teachers, or a digital awareness program for parents. However, we have found, and I really don't need to even tell you because I'm like talking to the converted here, that the technology is now spread across the entire responsibilities and functionality of the school, from administration, to pastoral, to community and building outreach, to creating partnerships and parent hubs. So, it's almost narrow-minded to think that technology is only for teaching and learning. Yes, that's the context we need to start with, because that's why we need to do, that's why we're jumping on the bandwagon now to bring about teaching and learning to close that gap. But if you have to think bigger and broader, you can now use the technology across the school. And that's when you actually start shifting the culture and mindsets. So why is it important now? Well, we are in a crisis, no surprise here, but we could potentially be in a crisis ahead again in a few months' time. You know, there's no surprise that in Leicester, students had started going back into their classrooms and meeting the teachers, only then to go back into lockdown, and then schools stopped again. So, you know, we could be in that position in a few months' time, and that's in the back of everyone's mind at the moment. Really, do we want to, the question you need to ask yourself now is, are you ready for that? Come September, October, possibly November, if your school is to close, can you carry on your teaching and learning? Is your school ready for this? Are your teachers ready for this? Do the students know what they need to do? And are parents in this position where if this happens, they know how to support the students, their children at home? It's important because we need to provide that continuing learning. We don't want to get that digital, we don't want to grow that digital divide anymore. And even if you're just starting the teaching online, you know, we could really ramp it up quickly. We want to continue to keep it buoyant so that we're providing an education for all. It's important now because we're going to have blended learning models where teachers will be in a classroom and they'll be teaching a great number of students, so maybe 20 or 20 in a classroom, with maybe 5 at home who are shielding, or 5 who are vulnerable and can't come into school, or for some schools, independent schools, students who are still away because they can't enter the country or they're not able to come at this moment in time. So we need to have that blending learning approach of being able to cope in this crisis. Again, similar to a hybrid economy, we've got schools who are catering to students here and are now opening their doors to other schools globally, for instance, to Philippines or to India. And they have to be able to you know, have one teacher deliver the same lesson but be used twice in 2 different contexts. We can't suddenly, as head teachers or local authorities, expect our teachers to do more. You know, whenever you hear teachers are not doing much and they've been sort of sitting on their laurels, I don't know which teachers those are, because all the teachers I've been speaking to have been working extremely hard, and to give them any more now would just sort of break them. So we've got to think of really creative ways where a teacher's delivering once, but that material can be used more than once. So it's a one-to-many approach rather than a one-to-one. We need to think of online pedagogies. What we once thought was feasible in a traditional environment may not necessarily be feasible online. And we found that it's not simply a matter of mirroring what you're doing in the classroom, again, in an online environment. So at the moment in time, I'm actually mirroring what I would do. I am talking right back at you, but this is not what I would do with our students at all. I would need to have that interaction. I'd be turning on my video, getting them to turn on the video, only for those who'd like to do so. That whole idea of sending warmth and making eye contact and inviting students in your classroom in an online environment is pretty key as well. So one of the teachers asked me is, well, you know, students don't really talk to me, they just turn it off. And I don't know what to do in this context. And I asked her one question only. Do you want to go to your classroom? If you were to go into your classroom now, if you were a student and you were called in by yourself to come into the classroom, would you go to it? And she said, not really. And I said, well, that's the reason why they're not coming. You've not made it inviting enough, exciting enough, warm enough. And those things are still very key because we've lost it. We don't have that sort of face-to-face empathy that comes with it. Then with that, you have this pastoral care. I mean, I don't have to say much here again, this whole idea about well-being and being sane, and we're finding so many children coming to school, some with anxiety, some nervous about what's going to happen, some saying, don't touch my stuff just in case I get COVID, or I'm not going to share. So it's having that whole online pastoral care as well within times like this. So 3 months from now, if your school was to go back in lockdown, how would you care for your community or for your students? I know some teachers have made phone calls or have come to the front doors of many students and families, but you could be in a better position if you start now, if you start planning. And then there's creating virtual communities. Ben, would you like me to get into how do you set up your digital strategy in school?
Why don't we start off, we'll go on to the challenges section and talk about this at the end, yeah?
Absolutely.
it's just, I was just inspired by your last bit of advice about engaging the audience. So I thought we should probably do so. So I want to just launch another poll. So that was where it was. First of all, it was really interesting. Thank you so much for like giving us like a outline of this current situation, everything you think we need to do as schools. Just want to tell people that we're recording this and we'll share this afterwards, so don't worry if you've missed anything. So now I'm going to do a quick poll, and we're moving on to sort of the challenges section. We want to know what your biggest challenges are currently facing your school. So I'll just launch the new one. And if you could just click whichever challenge you're facing right now. It's like some sort of horse race. Fly up. Can you see the results, Neelam?
No, I can't. I can't click it. So
I'll share them in a sec. Yeah.
Okay.
So far we've got student engagement is winning, but so is staff digital competency.
Okay. So it'd be interesting to know from the audience themselves, why is it a biggest challenge? And perhaps we can refer to that by looking at their comments as well. So if you have any more to say in terms of staff confidence, what do you think is the biggest challenge there? Then I can kind of refer to that as well.
Great, okay. Yeah, well, I'll end the poll now and you'll see the results.
Okay, interesting. Student engagement, that is usually the biggest one. And I think I kind of touched upon it, didn't I, early on, how to keep them engaged. We found that also our curriculum is not helping. So one of the conversations I'm having with some schools that I'm supporting, some more, I'd say, open-minded schools, because it does take, it will, I'm trying to think out of the box here. And I'm thinking out of the box because we've got theories that support colleges and universities, but less so with primary schooling and early secondary schooling. So in terms of student engagement, we found that the curriculum is actually holding us back to some content because the kids are not necessarily engaged. First of all, we're in the summer term, so that makes it hard. And they're not necessarily that keen on what we're teaching them, but we're sort of force feeding them, unfortunately, in some cases. So what some of us have done is actually tweak the curriculum to match the students' expectations and interests. So if I'm teaching computing to my year 7, 8, and 9 class, particularly Python in this case, they really didn't want to get involved in doing the project that was set out for them. So I said to them, okay, learn the basics of Python and create something else for me and work together as a team. And so that kind of helped a bit. And some of them jumped into Minecraft, some of them jumped in a different environment. One child actually abroad who could not get a hold of the technology itself said, can you just teach me how to do raw coding so I can do something with this? So I was kind of almost doing differentiated and personalized coding for them and helping them move along this way. So I think we almost have to make the curriculum relevant to them. And another thing I found was if you do have to stick with the curriculum, which we do in some cases, such as sciences and humanities, then I found that the learning styles are changing. So whereas in school, we have a very traditional method and we can teach our students, online, it's almost important to cater to students' learning styles so that you're offering them information in a verbal method, in a verbal, in a video method. I'm sure I'm using the wrong word here, in written methods, so on a document so they can read through it, and also in a way where they can do something with their hands, so kinesthetic. So we found that students are really good in school with struggling in online, for instance, and those that are really good online were probably not very great day-to-day students. So it's almost like you've got to apply your teaching in 4 different content, in 4 different learning styles here. And that's something that I think we need to think about more moving forward.
Okay. There's actually a couple of similar comments coming through on the stream, which is brilliant. I really appreciate those questions and comments, guys. Some really good ideas. One classic challenge is staff doing things the way they've always done it. Would whoever mentioned that like to sort of discuss that online and unmute themselves and turn the video on? If not, then Neelam, perhaps you could answer that question.
I quite like what Nick has said here, Nick Lenny. He said, I think it's not staff digital competence as much as understanding of blended digital pedagogy. can't be expected to learn overnight and without support. I completely 100% agree with you here. I think teachers need to understand the different methods of what is happening in the classroom versus what's happening online. And quite right, we've all been thrown into it. I think the teachers that I was training up, I only offered 3 pieces of advice. I did not give more, and I said, this is all you're going to run with, because I knew their life was going to turn around overnight. So I think unless you have that sort of, you have that expertise that somebody understands where they're going with it, and some sort of strategy. And this is why I'm going to go on about it, because you need that overarching strategy to say, I've got to drop pieces of information, pieces of knowledge into the teachers, but it has to be right now, the right sort of information at the right time. Because I think, having looked at the landscape in the last few months, there is an overwhelming amount of information out there. And what do you need to do, and what do you not need to do in the first instance? What do I need to do to get on with the next 3 months? And I think that's key.
Okay, brilliant. And we've had another really good comment from Deborah. There is a choice in whether students engage. No consequences mean some children choose to do very little. Do you have any ideas, or does the audience have any ideas on how we can overcome that challenge?
I think there is. Jake's happy to speak. Please, I think.
Jake, are you happy to speak?
Please correct me if I'm wrong.
I'll unmute him now if he wants to speak. Jake, go ahead.
Yeah, I made the comment about teachers doing things the way they always want to do it. I work across 24 schools as the computing curriculum lead, and I think the trickiest part is delivering like a wraparound kind of approach, delivering the tech or implementing new tech, but then making sure that there's a training to go alongside it. And I think when there's only one person trying to offer that training, it becomes tricky to give teachers confidence to fly with the tech that they've got. And I think we mostly use Chromebooks, and we look at as an academy that we're developing, like a blended approach. And I think going back to normality, whenever that may be, excited to see how we can use blended learning or flipped classroom learning when we've got tech implemented properly. But I think that is the main issue, just giving teachers the confidence with quick wins and wraparound support that isn't always there.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think it's so relevant now more than ever. And that's actually another question that tends to come up. How do we offer CPD in this virtual learning environment? And again, I would say you can't overburden teachers. It's a lot of information to take on. As you would know, it's a complex piece of design. So what are the 3 things you can filter down in the first month, and the second month hit another 3, and the third month? Now I would stage this. When I had the time, I would say do it per term, but we don't have time. So we have to work just a little bit faster. Yeah, thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Deborah, would you like to come on and ask your question? Just invite her to unmute.
Hi.
Hello. Oh, you're muted again.
Hopefully that's working.
Yeah, you're back, yeah.
Yeah, great. Interestingly, I work in the same group of schools as Jake that's just been on. I'm finding quite a lot of difference in the children, in the amount of work that they're completing. At the moment, I'm working in a bubble with 13 children who are very engaged, but I'm also setting home learning for the children at home, and there's quite a big difference in the engagement that I'm getting. And I think a lot of it's due to the social aspects of learning because they're not getting that feedback from the peers.
Yep. And I would agree, Deborah. I don't think anyone can replace face-to-face teaching. The empathy, the warmth, the interaction, the social cues that we offer, you just don't get that in an online environment. But when we're put in a situation where we have no choice, then you're right. What can we do to keep them engaged? And then that's when I'd say we have to think out of the box. It's so hard. There are days when I've heard teachers ask really big philosophical questions to students just to get them involved and engaged. Often I have to go down to their level and talk about things that they probably don't want to talk about. Like, so I'll ask them about their Instagram and their social accounts and what's trending, just so that I can create that connection with them. And so they don't, And I think it's also the formality of the classroom. It's very formal, and in an online environment, it becomes even colder. So like us now, you know, having this interactive sort of engagement, it makes it free flowing. But if a teacher is just speaking all the time, then it becomes difficult.
Yeah, definitely. We've used some things like Seesaw that have worked quite well, where the children have been able to post things and then feedback to each other. And I'm finding that the children that are at school are doing that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're just getting, because we've been off for so long as well, we're getting to the stage where the engagement is just naturally dropping as well.
Yes. And it is the summer term. We all want to go on holiday. Let me come away.
Thank you, Deborah. That's brilliant. And we've had a question from Mexico, which we'd like to bring on, if that's okay. And the name on Zoom is Comunidad INA. Would you like to ask your question? You can unmute yourself.
I cannot unmute. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Hey.
So yeah. So hi everyone. Yeah, I'm worried that in my local community, most parents, I teach in elementary school, and so most parents perceive that asynchronous learning is not effective, and it should not have a place in distant learning, and it goes against pretty much all recommendations for global. I mean, in the global discussion that we have right now. So it's hard to make an argument against them, right? Because mostly have to work, right? And it's really hard for them. And honestly, I'm looking for ways to show the benefits, right? And to communicate that asynchronous learning can work if we properly train the kids, right? And give us time to prepare for that. Because as Neelam said before, many of them, they don't have the habits to work on their own, right? So that's mostly my concern with the current situation.
And when you say elementary, how old are the children?
Yeah, they go from 6 to 12 years old.
6 to 12 years old. So that's our primary years. So that's a really interesting conversation. Our younger children, unless they are supported with an adult, their engagement levels drop very quickly. So one of the things I have told the teachers is, okay, you can literally start off with asynchronous teaching, but your videos cannot be longer than 10 minutes at max, because they're really young children, and the parents need to sit next to them as well, which is going to be a huge issue for the parent because they're trying to work at the same time. And then the task that follows has to be so simple that if the child doesn't understand, they need to go back and watch the video again. So I think if there is a place for asynchronous learning, yes, but can you find a place for live teaching as well? So could they do 10 minutes asynchronous, 10 minutes live? But if they cannot, then can you do asynchronous, 10 minutes asynchronous, and then have a really easy to follow up worksheet? That's what we do here. You're welcome.
Nice one, thank you, and great to have the international questions too. I've been asked if I can do a quick poll, and we haven't really got time to do it. I was busy typing away to see if we could. Someone asked what the sort of ratio was between asynchronous, synchronous, and the other different types of learning. That I'll have to, maybe we'll do as a follow up to this. We wanted to sort of go on to more sort of future looking stuff, didn't we, Neelam? Like sort of looking at what people's ambitions would be for the future, and then starting to think about what people could do in the next 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, and then maybe 12 months plus. Mm-hmm. Now, if I was to ask you that question, what would you want to do? And then if whilst you're listening to this, guys, if you could put your comments in the comments box on what you think your targets are for the next 3 to 6 months, should we say?
Okay. So if I went into a school now and they had no technology, but with the benefit of getting technology soon, in 3 to 6 months, I would want to have my technology embedded in school. So I'd need to find my ecosystem and have it embedded, work with the IT guys and say, get it in there. I'd need to ensure that if I'm in school and I'm using the technology in school, that my Wi-Fi, broadband, and internet filters, security and safety filters are in place, because the students are in my school. Therefore, I must keep them safe. And if I'm going to use the technology in school, it needs to work. So that needs to be there too. I know it sounds very tech at the moment, but I'm building my home. So I'm putting the bricks down. I would also make sure that if I'm working with younger children, I have the devices in hand that I need for them because I'm doing it with them in school. Or if not, if I was to go into lockdown, I have enough devices to give a child, or that they have a device at home that they could bank on. And if I was working with older children, I would look at a BYOD policy just to keep my costs down. And I would start teacher training immediately. Those are some of the things I would do for sure within the 3 to 6 months that I have. Anybody
Fantastic.
else?
Yeah. Any ideas from the audience about what you would like to do in the next 3 to 6 months?
Okay.
Got a nice comment. This will be a unique opportunity to teach beyond the classroom walls.
Absolutely. But you've got to think of safeguarding issues there, because you don't know who's going to join your class. Appoint teacher, don't teacher. So that was funny enough, Jeanette, I think it's Jeanette, it was my next point. So if I was to go into 6 to 12 months with that same school, I would then appoint digital leaders across departments. Sometimes I find it easier to go down faculty level if you can, because it's easier to just infiltrate that information. Ensure my educational workflows have been embedded, and I would actually write them out step by step so people knew what they were. I get my pastoral care up and running, because that's going to be quite key in the event that we go back into lockdown. And I would start creating, I'd look at some differentiated and personalized learning ways of doing things. So if I'm running teams again, I would have channels ready. If I need to create different learning games for other students, have all that in mind. And I would start looking at creating communities, virtual communities. So one of the things we've done here is we've engaged parents and our schools by setting up like running was a competition, yeah, I guess running competitions on which school can walk the most on a particular day within 1 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and have that sort of competitive spirit, but building that community space around you. I don't know if I was to go beyond 12 months, that's when I would get quite exciting and quite innovative and look at immersive technology and bringing in AI, looking at its STEAM, particularly about around data analytics. I find that quite interesting in this whole online environment. But there are some comments, yeah. So there's trained teachers who resist inertia to mirror their pupils' focused thoughts. Yep, I'd agree with that. Anything else?
No, I was, yeah, some really interesting comments. Thank you so much for sharing, everybody. Neelam, I was going to ask if you could share, so your slides now on like how to make this happen. So you've developed a framework, haven't you, which you normally use with schools that you're consulting?
Yeah. So when I go into schools here and sometimes globally as well, and they want to start setting up the digital strategy in a school, what does that look like? And I always say to them, it's a 4-wheel process. You've got to have a vision. It's going to take time. There is some investment up front, which you can sort of counterbalance as you progress through your strategy, and you need to have somebody who's accountable. Some of the most successful schools that have done a really good job with their digital strategy are those that are accountable. Now, unfortunately, we don't have much time, but it can still be done. You can still get the crux of the entire strategy online in a few months, whereas before we had the time, we don't, but it can be done. What you'd have to do is you get the bare bones on, and then you flesh it out later on. So we don't really. Can you show us
those slides? The KPIs you showed us, or the framework?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm just going to. So the digital strategy, is that it?
Yeah, or the tables you've developed with the different KPIs for each part of the strategy. Do you have that?
So that, yeah. Okay, so one of the things I do.
We can't see it yet. Are you showing your screen? Sorry.
Okay, hold on a second. A little bit of a technical issue here. I was talking to myself a minute ago. Right, so actually I was taking you through this this process about setting up.
We've got 5 minutes, by the way. We've got 5 minutes, Neelam, just a quick time check.
Yes, let's just say Ben. Okay, so let me get down to it. So one of the things I would do is I would take our school to what I call my KPIs. I have a list of KPIs in 5 different categories: leadership, tech, pedagogy, well-being, sustainability. Within each one, there are at least 10 KPIs. You'll see I've pulled out one from each section. So number one is, is there a digital vision strategic statement for implementation of edtech in your school? Do you have this? If you do, tick yes. If not, no, or maybe something in progress. Then you'd see the same with a similar sort of KPI for the technology side of things. Does your tech support blended and remote learning with the school applications in school? Again, it works like a checklist. Then number 3 is looking at a pedagogical strand. Do you use technology as an enabler for teaching and learning? And then 4 and 5. Now, so this is the sort of thing that I would go with armed in school and get them to do it. But if I could just drill down a bit further, you'll see a KPI based around teaching and learning. I'm only showing you the top 5, mainly because my screen only shows this much. But you'll see the top 5 things we'll look at. Does your school digital strategy contain a pedagogic strand, which we spoke about? Is your use of technology, is it grounded in the enhancement of school-based processes such as feedback, questioning, and lesson delivery? Can your school demonstrate how technology can be used to reduce teacher workload? And can it add flexibility to current teaching methods? Now, the stuff you see here is just the top 5, but there's about 50 of these. And I've worked for many years trying to build this up because, and mainly from the experiences that I've gained from schools here locally, some nationally and also globally, because I've tried to make it a very generic sort of KPI for schools and then also personalize it as we see fit. But this is years of work, not just happened last few months. And I've actually put it out to very critical advisors, friends that I would value and highly regard in my area to add to it. So yeah, it's sort of the KPIs that I would take someone through if we were to get onto this. And that's one of the things that I would definitely offer within a plan. The other thing I would do is because we're looking at doing this quickly in the first 4 months, it sort of helps someone go through an action plan. So it helps them develop the vision, help them identify the objectives, help them write out their workflows, help them look at the pedagogical strategies, look at personalizing approaches. And one such example is this. So I would ask you so many questions. I will leave you with worksheets and action plans and say, okay, have a look at this. Answer number 1, answer number 2, answer number 3. And once you've done all of this, at the very end, I will hand you the KPI and say, now have you got it all in place? And if you haven't, it's fine because we're doing a real fast dive into this. Now fill out the rest. You've got the core in, now flesh it out. And so some of the questions I'll ask you are, identify your non-negotiable systems in your school. Some systems that you're just not going to get rid of no matter what. It's fine, put them down. Now identify the system for your education. Write that down. Now think about the software applications that your department use, which are never going to go and they're going to be there, etc., etc. So those are the sort of questions that I would ask anybody if they are looking to get started, or they're in the process of their journey, or if they are now moving forward. And so I often leave on this slide, which says, I'm going to touch the future because this is what I do. And I will educate anybody who wants to come my way so I can help them. But are you ready to do it? And will you do it?
Right. Thank you very much, Neelam. That's fantastic. So that was really, really interesting. We've had a bit of a whistle-stop tour there through your brain, basically. And we had lots of people asking if they can have a copy of the KPIs. So we will be showing this video so they can see the first 5 KPIs. But if you'd like to see the full set of KPIs and have Neelam walk you through this process, we've created a accelerator program which starts next week, next Wednesday, a week today. And the idea of that program is to get schools from wherever they are to ready for September in going through your KPI framework, right, with a clear action plan every week. And so it consists of a 90-minute webinar, very similar to this, probably less people, but we'll see. A bit more interactive. There'll be at least half an hour for questions and Q&A. And there'll be a private Facebook group for everyone to join and to collaborate as they go through the journey, with you, right, Neelam?
Yes. So yeah. I would like to say that it would be a very, almost like a bespoke, personalized approach for you. The less, we could put them in different groups, for instance, so that we can work on a one-to-one basis for the particular, the specifics that each school needs as well.
Cool. So yeah, there's a couple of ways. There's the accelerator, and then also if you want more help or more bespoke help, then we can do there's one-to-one sort of support from yourself. And yeah, we'll be sending a copy of this webinar and a link to that. You can see a link to the accelerator in the notes. There is a cost for the accelerator program, unfortunately, but it's $290 £290 per school. And the idea is we want to encourage schools to bring more than one member of staff if they want to. So you can involve your IT director or your IT coordinator and a teacher. As we've said, we think the more the merrier. We've got 2 minutes left. Are there any other questions people would like to ask before we go?
Can I just say that in terms of the accelerator course you mentioned just now, for anybody who wants to see this more visually, it's a 4-week course. And I need you to understand that, what we're going to do in 4 weeks is just deliver the base for you to get started. But we would start everything from setting a vision to brainstorming, to writing it all down, to then selecting your technology, your ecosystems, to then training up your staff, and in terms of giving them understanding what is different, the pedagogical value behind it, and then in terms of writing up that training development program for you and get started. So it's literally 4 weeks, a 3-year project compressed into 4 weeks to get you started. And just so that we're not in this position again moving forward, because we don't want to be. And if you have the opportunity to make that change, then this is what we're offering here.
Yeah, we just want to help you guys get ready and get through the next 6 to 12 months or however long it's going to be until we can go back to normal. And we think that's probably going to be the best way. So thank you so much for joining us, everybody. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you have too. If you leave any comments or in the box, and we'll send around the recordings and a link to the accelerator program and everything else, maybe even a discount code if Michael's feeling generous after this webinar. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Neelam, for your time.
Thank you, and I'm really sorry we couldn't get to all your questions. Thank you.
Cheers, everybody. Thanks. Have a good evening.